I've said multiple times on my channel that stealth is my favorite video game genre. Slowly puzzling out the best way through an area without getting detected can feel tense, empowering, and satisfying if done well. The first places my mind goes when someone mentions stealth games are Metal Gear and Splinter Cell, two titans of the genre that made such a huge impact that they are still generally held up as the gold standard a decade after they essentially died. These games play very differently, but both encourage the player to utilize a mastery of their environment and gadgets to get from point A to B without leaving a trace of their existence. But on this channel, I talk a lot about Assassin's Creed, and so I always end up having to split my discussion on stealth into two parts: traditional stealth, like Metal Gear and Splinter Cell, and what we call social stealth, a concept that is both rarer and more poorly defined. Social stealth sees you walking around in broad daylight, blending into your environment to stay hidden instead of crouching behind a crate or throwing down a smoke bomb. But what does that actually look like in-game? Just Googling what is social stealth doesn't actually yield a ton of results beyond Assassin's Creed montages, and the two franchises I would say dominate the conversation on the topic, Hitman and Assassin's Creed, play nothing alike. So to try and fill that gap, I want to take the next few minutes to go over what social stealth has historically looked like in games, what it looks like to do it well, and what our expectations can be for future titles that attempt to give you the ability to hide in plain sight. One way to attempt to define social stealth is to pin down what separates it from traditional stealth. Since the old days of Metal Gear on the MSX, the simple concept of never crossing into your enemy's sightline was front and center. By Metal Gear Solid, this idea had evolved into distinct vision cones, but the general idea remained: do not be where the enemy is looking. Whether that means you are crouched behind waist-high cover, hiding on a gargoyle on the ceiling, or creeping around an unlit room, success in a stealth game generally coincides with your enemy never seeing you at all. But if we were to cut ahead to the year 2000, when Hitman Codename 47 came out, we would see a starkly different type of game. Instead of having you infiltrate a secret facility or steal documents under the cover of darkness, Codename 47 begins by sticking you in the middle of a Hong Kong street in broad daylight and tells you to have at it. Being seen by the guards isn't an instant alert, and in fact, they may not be bothered by you at all. In Metal Gear Solid, you see vision cones on the map, and if one touches you, you get caught. In Hitman, a guard can be staring at you without issue. The detection system instead has to be able to identify if you are in a restricted area, and if you are performing actions that should get the guard's attention. Over half a decade later, Assassin's Creed would be released, and with that came the advent of the titular creed itself, a three-tenet set of rules of which the most mechanically relevant was hide in plain sight. You were given 9 names and told to kill them, but with no crouch button and no day-night cycle, you would have to find a way to take out your targets in crowded streets and escape unscathed. With these two franchises in mind, we can start to carve out a definition for social stealth. Traditional stealth is all about not being seen by your enemy. Social stealth is all about not being noticed by your enemy. Instead of hiding behind physical objects or manipulating light sources, you are hiding within the accepted social norms that allow hundreds of people to pass us by every day without us remembering any of their faces. This is essentially what Jade Raymond, a producer on Assassin's Creed, expressed when she coined the term to the public. She called it an idea that you're not hidden when you're in the shadows, you're hidden when you're doing things that are socially acceptable. And so, with a clearer idea of what social stealth is supposed to be, why exactly does it look so different depending on what game you play? What should social stealth look like? There are certain things that need to exist in social stealth games for them to work. First off, there needs to be a clear-cut suspicion system. Pretty much every stealth game has one of these nowadays. Gray area between a guard being oblivious and knowing exactly where you are makes for more interesting gameplay. But in social stealth, it is especially necessary because guards have to be able to cast doubt without outright shooting on sight. Are you wearing normal clothes in a totally public area? You're probably not even going to be on the guard's radar. Are you wearing the right outfit but holding something that isn't standard issue? Yeah, maybe someone's going to check up on you. Are you pulling out a gun in the middle of a police station? Yeah, okay, now they see you. Social stealth games live and die by the complexity of their AI. These systems only work if the player feels like they are tricking these NPCs, meaning that you need AI that can identify when social norms are being broken. This also requires that social norms be in full effect, i.e. having crowds in public places dominating your maps instead of closely guarded military bases. But when everything does come together, what exactly is the player doing in a social stealth scenario? Well, we don't have the largest pool of games to pull examples from, but in the ones we do have, I have identified 3 things that you'll be doing: distracting, hiding, or role-playing. Distraction has always been a common feature in stealth. Since the early days of Metal Gear, you can make noise or throw down a dirty magazine to get guards to leave their posts. But in social stealth, what can set the concept apart is that you are manipulating your environment to cause other people to break social norms and thereby divert attention from you. Some Assassin's Creed games will allow you to throw money on the ground, causing civilians to swarm and cause a scene while you slip by the guards unnoticed. In AC Syndicate, some missions allow you to manipulate the placement of a crowd so that you can access restricted areas in the chaos. Even AC Valhalla, a game I don't believe has very good stealth at all, has a fun mechanic where you can anger a drunk citizen so the guards have to go and deal with them. All of this is mechanically very similar to throwing a coin or whistling to get someone's attention, but they play into the fantasy of causing other people to break social norms in an extreme enough way that you're not caught for breaking any rules yourself. Now, the second player action I identified is hiding, which you are technically doing the whole time, but here I mean specific instances where you are making your character invisible to your enemies. Hitman has a lot of blending areas where you can playfully run some animations where Agent 47 does something to pretend he belongs, whether that means fixing something or cutting up some fish. While these animations are playing, Agent 47 cannot be detected. I like to call these zones the reskinned haystacks because Assassin's Creed has a ton of these areas that make you look like you're engaging in social stealth when really you're just hiding in a very traditional way. For example, benches have been a staple of the series from day one, and while they feel like a more social stealth option than the rooftop gardens you also find in that game, mechanically they're exactly the same. Now, there is nothing inherently wrong with reskinned haystacks, but the argument can be made that they are meant to imitate social stealth instead of facilitate it. Going back to Assassin's Creed Valhalla, it has a ton of blending zones where you can have your character sit and drink or spin a wheel or do any number of random things, but none of them really matter. The animations are just for show, and you're just there to turn invisible, no different than if there were a bunch of haystacks littered around the area. Even Assassin's Creed's most famous social stealth feature could be accused of being a reskinned haystack: systemic crowd blending, through which the player can become invisible to the outside world so long as they are contained within a crowd of NPCs. The power fantasy the series is going for here is clear. There are so many movies where the protagonist sprints into a crowd and the chaos makes them impossible to find. But sometimes it doesn't quite live up to that in AC. I've talked about some sequences in AC4, a game that I love, where you were tasked with tailing your enemy through both urban and wilderness environments. When stealth boils down to running from bush to crowd to bush to crowd, the lack of a difference between the two becomes very pronounced. But that isn't to say that crowd blending is without innovation. There are many situations where crowd blending can add a lot to a player's level of immersion and open up new possibilities when done well. And a lot of that involves its ability to facilitate player roleplay. Now, when I say roleplay, I don't mean RPG mechanics like a skill tree or build crafting. Instead, I'm talking about the player's desire to use their character to act out a certain role based on their own gameplay. Hitman is a series that thrives on allowing you to do this. The disguise feature is at the center of Hitman, allowing you to pretend to belong in places you do not. But it would be selling it short to say all it does is make you invisible, like crowd blending. In Hitman, you are regularly encouraged to put on a show for the AI to demonstrate that you are just a normal fellow that they have no reason to be suspicious of. Hitman 2: Silent Assassin, which has perhaps the most brutally difficult detection system in the series, requires you to be walking when near enemies on hard difficulties no matter your disguise, and turning to face away from your enemies can save you in high-pressure moments. Carrying the wrong weapon or being in the wrong place will send guards sprinting toward you. The fourth entry, Hitman Blood Money, started the system within which making kills look like accidents would be rewarded. Making a spectacle of assassination within which death becomes a performance that tricks people into thinking nothing abnormal happened at all can make the player feel like they really pulled a fast one on the guards. It could be argued that AC1 was the only Assassin's Creed game that asked the player to roleplay within social norms like this. While later games would lean more heavily into that reskinned haystack method, AC1 was very much about getting through guarded areas in broad daylight without drawing attention. A lot of people remember how frustrating these beggars were, who existed only to try and force you to break social norms and disrupt your roleplay. This form of acting out a role is very unique to social stealth, but it's tough to find games that even attempt it. If you look up single-player social stealth games, past Hitman and AC, you start getting results like Slater, Death to Spies, and Alekine's Gun. I'm not going to speak to the quality of these games because I haven't played them, but I doubt I'm alone here. a lot of people haven't been exposed to social stealth games because they just aren't very widespread. That is to say, they're not widespread in single-player games. Social stealth has actually had something of an explosion in the last decade, but it has come from a place that looks nothing like Assassin's Creed and Hitman. In 2010, when Ubisoft really started to milk Assassin's Creed, they did what every big-budget studio at the time did. They added a multiplayer mode. What sets Assassin's Creed's multiplayer apart from other single-player games with such modes was the fact that it was honestly really solid. You play as an NPC and there are dozens of copies of your character around a set map. At all times, you are hunting another player, and more often than not, someone is hunting you as well. Both evasion and assassination require you to blend into your environment. These maps are set in urban environments with very few options for outright hiding from your opponents. Instead, you have to trick anyone who looks at you into thinking you're just another NPC. There is a purity to this kind of social stealth. Real human beings are looking at the crowd, waiting for one of the NPCs to break the established norms. And these aren't real-life social norms, but instead the norms only people who play the game would fully pick up on. Sure, at a low level, you're looking for NPCs who are running, since only players can do that, but as you get better, you are focused on how they move, the routes they take, whether or not they stop in weird places, whether or not they are someplace they shouldn't be. You, as a person, are doing the job that devs try to give their AI in single-player social stealth experiences. Assassin's Creed is one of the earlier versions of this type of game, but they have exploded over the years. Trouble in Terrorist Town, Among Us, The Ship, and the list goes on. Games where you learn what actions a friendly character would take and do your best to imitate them, when in reality, your intentions are entirely nefarious. Even Watch Dogs, a franchise also made by Ubisoft, has integrated multiplayer social stealth mechanics that are more in-depth than anything we've really seen from AC in the last decade. NPCs have established rules, and they have to be incredibly complex if you want there to be a continuous challenge for the player to get by them undetected. A real person can find infinite ways to remain inconspicuous even with the simple mechanics of a game like Among Us. In 2021, Edge magazine published an article about the resurgence of social stealth in multiplayer indie titles, and I will link that below, with interviews with indie creators that I found very interesting. A quote at the end really stuck with me. Whether it's driven by AI or repurposed player data, the best social stealth is never going to be solely simulation. The genre comes to life when it invites the gaze of a second human being, or third, or even a fourth. The experience of playing one of these multiplayer games really isn't similar at all to a single-player social stealth game, but the inherent complexity of PvP play has caused it to thrive in this modern era. It shows how fun social stealth can be, and while I'm not sure I agree that the best social stealth will always be multiplayer, the point stands that companies and creators will have to invest a lot more money into solo social stealth for it to reach its potential. So with all this in mind, what does good social stealth look like? We can know it when we see it, but the landscape is so sparse that the subgenre could look totally different 10 years from now. Distracting and hiding and role-playing were easy ways for me to sum up the existing social stealth mechanics that are popular right now, but Assassin's Creed and Hitman play so differently from one another that it's more than possible that the next big social stealth game will be totally unique from both. It just seems like social stealth isn't a topic companies are especially interested in exploring. Ubisoft erased it from Assassin's Creed entirely for years despite it being one of the selling points of the first game, and even now only a heavily watered-down version exists in Mirage. Even IO, the creators of Hitman, had to restructure their operations after Square Enix dropped them in 2017, despite the success of the franchise's reboot, with SE reporting that they wanted to maximize player satisfaction as well as market potential going forward. In a world where Metal Gear, Splinter Cell, Thief, and Dishonored are all MIA, Hitman remains popular, holding down the stealth genre fort, and yet no one is trying to make games like it. Now, despite the vagueness of the concept, I can still give my opinion on what I'd love to see from future social stealth games. Taking cues from multiplayer, I do believe social stealth is at its best when it impacts gameplay and not just animations. In some AC games, getting seen results in instant suspicion if a guard sees you no matter what, and you can only escape by hiding, which is mechanically exactly the same as what you would do in a normal stealth game. In my research, I found this blog on GameDeveloper.com that I will also link below that comes to the exact same conclusion I have in multiple videos. If the difference between social stealth and traditional stealth is the type of animation that plays when you hide, are you really maximizing the potential of the concept? Now, while I do believe social stealth in Assassin's Creed started out shallow and unfortunately never got the focus it deserved, I don't say all this to pile on that series. AC has had different variations of disguise mechanics ranging from literal disguises to using NPCs to get you into places, while Hitman has integrated crowd blending as well as its fair share of dull crouch and cover missions throughout its history. And AC crowd blending can be really cool sometimes. But Hitman has undoubtedly been more willing to commit itself to the concept of social stealth than any other gaming franchise, Assassin's Creed very much included. Hitman is so successful because it gives players an experience that Assassin's Creed gave up on a long time ago, and outside of multiplayer games, it kind of has the market cornered. In order to see new and unique ways to manipulate crowds and blend in, we will likely need to see the series get some competition. Until that happens, for right now, Hitman is social stealth. That's all I've got. Let me know what your favorite social stealth mechanics are in the comments, and I'd love to chat with you. Happy 2024. Have a great day, and do take care of yourself.